There's a moment every business owner remembers the first time payroll hits, not because it's complicated, but because it's heavy. All of a sudden, the business isn't just about your goals or your vision, it's about other people's rent, their families, their sense of security. Payroll shows up on a report as a number, but in real life, it carries responsibility and pressure that most leaders don't talk about. Today, we're talking about the emotional weight of payroll, what it does to decision making, sleep, and the way business owners carry stress long after the numbers are run.
And I think that's what makes payroll especially heavy is that it's both practical and deeply personal. You can't just logic your way through it. You're not only asking, can the business afford this? You're also asking, what happens if it can't? I've watched incredibly capable leaders hold that question quietly, feeling like they're supposed to be confident while carrying uncertainty they don't feel allowed to voice. Payroll isn't just a financial obligation, it's an emotional contract. And pretending it doesn't affect you doesn't make you stronger, it makes you more alone.
All right, this is truly one of my favorite topics because it affects so many business owners. I'm actually in the thick of it right now within my own business. But the reason that I love this so much is because I feel like so many business owners feel scared, feel uncertain, they're up at night in a very preventable way, right? Like when you have the weight of employees and payroll, yes, it's going to carry some burden as a business owner and a leader, but a lot of it can be prevented by planning. So let's dig in. Payroll is often the largest fixed cost in a business. The true cost of an employee is never what you hire them for. So what I mean by this is if we are talking about bringing an employee on at say $60,000, the hire really costs somewhere between $75,000 and $85,000 because you have to account for things like payroll tax, benefits, insurance, training, equipment, whatever it's going to take to make that employee successful. And so, one of the first places I see so many business owners get in trouble with payroll or start to have those sleepless nights about how they're going to cover payroll is that when they decided to bring an employee on, they said, I'm going to bring on an employee at $60,000 and they're expecting it to cost $60,000. And now all of a sudden they're having to absorb 15 to 25,000 extra dollars. And while that seems to most businesses a lot, you break it down on a monthly, we're talking upwards of $2,000 a month in a small business. So I think digging into this first kind of section on costs of an employee is so important. Have you worked with business owners, or do you see business owners that struggle with not understanding all of the cost associated with bringing employees on?
Absolutely. And it's very relevant right now as I'm working through an exercise and why I have reached out to your firm for a different way to look at this exercise. So we are going through growth with one of my clients, and we are essentially the volume of work has increased, and we can no longer sustain the current structure. So we are looking for the lowest level of bookkeeper. So really it's AR, AP kind of clerk, if you will. and and so in budgeting them into my cash flow projections, yes, and the starting point, you brought up 60K. This is actually the starting point that we started talking and planning about. Well, okay, this 60K is now turning into, as you mentioned, all of those other things. And because we made a really great move, a very gracious move towards employees, we started covering more of family plans. I now have to, for budgeting and planning purposes, I always kind of assume the highest, the most conservative. So I'm assuming that they have a family, I'm kind of assuming the highest of everything. And so when I put all of those things into together to see, okay, what is this employee really going to cost me? Well, we're actually now talking 92 and some change. And so that is exactly why I reached out to you, because to see if fractional makes a difference here, because I am planning, we're growing very quickly, but this is a very different kind of growth. And this is one thing that you have to keep in mind as a business owner, as you are hiring employees. It's not just about you. You both have to align with your needs and wants, right? And so this is where I'm struggling right now, because I myself am a very driven person. Everybody else I know, everybody else whom, my contacts recommend to me, they're all very driven people. Nobody wants to stay in one place. But the need of the business is, I need, this level of work to just, to crank through these two things, ARAP. And when we grow, we're expecting growth. So I'm going to need to hire more people next year. But there's this dilemma. I'm growing. My needs are, I'm going to need to double that body who's just doing ARAP. And so, and now I'm thinking like, well, shit, like I can't justify 93 grand for data entry. And the fact that it's only going to last me, maybe through the end of the year. And next year I'm going to have to get another 93K, to start picking up some of that, the work that my new bookkeeper is now at capacity for. So this is where, reaching out to you, I have found the solution that I need, which is keeping within budget and keeping, keeping within budget for my scaling plans, and knowing that when I need a second body, it's not going to carry all of those other burdens with it.
You touch on a lot of great points in there, which I do have plans to touch on later in the episode. But we talked in the last episode about communication with our vendors, communication with our customers, and it's no different in the hiring process. You have to be communicative, you have to be transparent, and to your point, I see it too. I think that it's pretty dominant in our profession of the accounting world. I don't know many people that go to school for accounting and finance thinking, I'm just going to sit as a bookkeeper for the rest of my career. They're driven. They have ultimate goals of, being a CFO or being a leader at an investing company or working for a large firm. So I see this all the time in my business. But if you communicate those up front, which is very hard, because then you're like, I have this great candidate here that I know could do the job, but I'm going to have that difficult conversation in 6 months about why they're not being offered more pay or why they're not being offered, growth opportunity. And so I would say to the business owners listening to this now, being very transparent in the hiring process of what the business needs and where this role is going to go is super important. But you also mentioned something else about the planning process and timing. And so your business right now, it's a very relevant topic in the fact that when you hire, the timing on it matters. Most business owners, specifically small business owners or entrepreneurs, they start to feel the pressure, the weight of I'm doing so much, and they get reactive. And I just need to bring another person on. And they don't prepare themselves in a way of, what is this person going to do? Having a very clear job description outlined, having a very clear salary guide in mind, and what the performance review schedule is going to look like, what the possible raise structure looks like, and you have to have that before. And you also have to, smart business leaders, work through this exercise that you're working through to understand, am I hiring too early? And what I have found is, signals that you're hiring too early are things like you're burning through cash, or you're adding pressure while you're adding an employee. If you are feeling added pressure by adding bodies, it was probably not the right move. There's something else that's broken, likely operationally. Um, and if you're hiring too late, you're creating bottlenecks, or you're burning out leadership with training, or taking them away from their real roles to get immersed in what's going on in this new role. And so, a couple things that I've noticed in assessing the right timing of bringing someone on are things like revenue consistency, right? Like, if you know what your revenue is, and what I mean by consistency is not necessarily the same amount month over month, but fully understanding your sales cycle, fully understanding your seasonal cycles as far as, your ups and downs. And when you get to that down, are you going to be able to retain that employee? Margin strength is another thing you want to look at, because adding an employee is going to it's going to eat into your margins. Cash reserves, system readiness, pricing issues, efficient processes. Are we going to be in a situation where we're overstaffed, and which creates underperformance? So these are some of the things that I encourage business owners when they start talking about, I think it's time to hire. We start going through some of these things to think about. But I would love to hear about kind of the process that you guys are going to. And I know it's been a build up for you guys in thinking about adding this. What are some of the things that you have looked at or considered in getting to this point of hiring?
I think one of the pain points I'm experiencing right now is probably insufficient planning in advance. Because right now I'm mid-tax season. I have so many different deadlines and so many different people counting on me, and so many different balls I'm dropping, because it's tax season, but operations go on, everything else goes on. I am trying to find somebody, and like I will be feeling like, what if I had a body right now, I would be ignoring them, because I just don't. It's an opportunity cost of time for me now to then stop what I'm doing and start training. And so this kind of is an example of had to do, like, you knew you were going to have this scheduled in January, that this spans 3 months. So having better planning before we got into this dire situation would have been key. And I'm paying for the consequences of not doing that. One thing that a little bit of a side topic here that I want to touch on, just it flew into my mind as you were talking about kind of that preparation and overstaffing or understaffing. Really, the planning around your employees is something my husband shared recently that I never really thought about in my own planning for my departments, but it is absolute key. So I want to share this. When usually we realize that there's a need for more bodies when something that's being asked of us, we're no longer able to perform it at the speed or whatever, or maybe we just cost too much to be working on something that shouldn't have a high cost attached to getting completed. But whatever the reason is, typically we're like, okay, so when I hire a new person, okay, they're going to take this off my lap, they're going to take this off my lap, and you kind of start your list. And one nugget that my husband shared that is so important that I will absolutely be putting this into my planning is when they come to take on their role, if one of the items you put into their responsibility is X, well, just because you touched X on a surface, because you had to work on this, you had to touch this thing with some other work that you're doing, now you don't have time for it. Well, now that you've hired a person who's owning that, They're not just going to do this surface thing. They're going to own that whole thing that has a lot more workflows that you're not even doing. You don't even know that they exist because you're not owning that whole sphere. And so part of that planning is, as you're putting down these bullet points of responsibilities and expectations, if you're wanting them to own, okay, I don't have bandwidth for this, but I want you to own this part, give them sufficient time to add more, to own it fully, and know that that takes time. So I would recommend really like planning 50% of your time of like things that to put onto your employee, knowing that that other half is going to be of them flourishing in their department and uncovering all the things that you didn't even know that somebody had to be working on.
Yeah, I think that's I couldn't have said it better myself. One thing, like I said, I'm also in this kind of realm of hiring employees. When I started the firm, being, the type A planner that I am, I had a 3, 6, 9, 12, 18-month plan of, by this month, I wanted this month, this much revenue. By this month, I wanted this many CFO clients. By this month, I was going to start considering bringing on an employee. By this month, I was going to consider having a full staff. And while that plan is great, it gives me the bones for when I get to those steps of, this is what I need my hiring to look like, and these are the types of job descriptions that I need in place. Those timelines don't always line up, right?
Mhm.
I'm already kind of operating at where I was not expecting to operate until like the 12-month mark, which is a great problem to have. My husband constantly reminds me, but poor planning on leadership's part is not helpful to onboarding employees. And it's not their responsibility to pick up that poor planning. And so I'm kind of sitting in that right now. And as I onboard employees, you probably are dealing with some of these same thoughts, right? As you onboard employees, you want that onboarding process to be seamless. You want it to be fair. You want it to be a representation of not only my business that is become, a baby to me, but
Mhm.
also a representation of the leader that they can expect me to be, right? I'm there to
Mhm.
support them when needed, but also they need to know that I'm giving them the freedom and autonomy to operate at the level that I believe I hired them at.
Right.
And so when you have those things clearly lined out and you have a very clear picture of what the onboarding process looks like, your expectations are very clear. And so when things aren't being met or when things are falling through the cracks, you can kind of come back to, this is the job description we agreed on. These are the tasks at bare minimum we agreed on. And if we have people that are not in leadership roles and coming into companies, I want to be very mindful that job descriptions are very rarely all inclusive of all of your tasks, right? It's the
Right.
bare minimum, and
Absolutely.
most leaders are expecting you to take accountability to fill in the voids, not necessarily create burnout and unhealthiness, but you may be tasked with things that are relevant to your roles and responsibility that may not be labeled. But if my employees are not meeting these roles and responsibilities and job descriptions that we agreed on up front, then there's an accountability piece that we can come back to and say, these were what we agreed to. And it makes that conversation a little bit easier in terms of, am I not living up to your expectations because you're not living up to my expectations, and how do we meet in the middle? And you can have those conversations with compassion and with grace, and not with this like authoritarian kind of context that a lot of leaders think that they need to. But I would stress that the planning, the onboarding, the organization, and the idea that they're going to come on and just relieve all of your stresses and worries is a pipe dream.
Indeed. You had some great things on the agenda for today's topic that I wanted to jump into, specifically around, founders and their excitement to hire and to treat, to give employees what they want, but then the stresses of having to scale back and lay off. So I want to talk about some of those real conversations that are happening. And I'd like to kind of start off with a personal anecdote of two clients of mine who made a similar move, and both of them kind of dealt with it differently. But both were in construction, and when I was in the flooring sphere, we in construction, I should preface, it is very typical to have installers, so your labor cost, your installers, to have them working at piece rate pay. And what that means is, like, it's not hourly, it's not time based, it's based on the quantities that they're laying. So if it's like a tile, I laid x amount square feet of tile. And so essentially, like, this is in the bidding process, the project manager knows their quantities, they have a specific rate per per square foot for different materials that they pay to installers. The installers know this going in. There's something called the work order that is built from a budget from your bid, which outlines to the installer what work they're going to do, what the quantity is, and how much they're getting paid per unit of measurement. And so it's a little hard on employers to encourage speed because essentially they're getting paid the same amount if it takes them a day or if it takes them a week, because it's measured on the quantities laid. And so this does kind of, it can create issues for for owners, but typically on this side, the installer, they want to make money, so they're like, okay, I don't want to drag my feet, I want to get this done as quickly as possible so I can move on to the next job, so I can party on the weekend. That's typically how it is for installers that I'm familiar with, is all the earnings get washed away during the weekend. But anyway, the problem, or I guess the opportunity, came for my prior, the company that I worked with was, they were working on a big project. They had several big projects in town, and their staff, is representing the company, and their people are asking, okay, you're with this company, okay, great. And typically when it's a subcontractor relationship, sometimes the subcontractors, they don't care very much about how they represent the company, because they're a contractor, they're their own boss. They might subcontract for this company here, on this day, and then another one here. They're kind of their own free agents. Where my the leader of the company was like, well, hey, I want them to, number one, represent the company well, as when they're on site, when people are asking them whom they're with, and just kind of build that trust with other general contractors of, these are my people, they do good work, and you want to hire our company to do this labor. So essentially the move went to my boss hired all of the installers in-house, all of them. He was so excited about it, and we had like 40 installers. So the tragedy there was absolutely no plan before it. There was excitement galore. He was so excited to have them, like, for first time in their lives, actually have like a 401k account and contribute to something beyond the weekend, and I say this, by the way, not judging installers, blanket with a blanket kind of judgment. This is what they would tell me, that that basically all of their earnings would be, liquidated during the weekend. So in any case, he was very excited to like actually give them like a real job, a real, benefits and retirement and all of that stuff. And unfortunately, we just absolutely could not sustain it, and the business went in a very bad direction. And unfortunately, at that time, it was too early to say like, oh shit, okay, that was a bad call, and how am I going to unroll all of this stuff that I've been trying to roll in? I'm going to lose staff, because of it. And unfortunately, that's kind of where it went. It had to get really, 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 really bad for to save the business and be like, okay, let's go back to the old model. And then I had another client who did the same thing, bringing in installers in-house. But now those jobs are not profitable anymore because they're taking their dandy time. And by the way, once you are an in-house employee, that's where there truly is no incentive to move quicker, because you are getting paid, for just being there essentially. And so luckily, this client is very, he understands the implications, the levers to pull, the consequences of this. So he saw very, very quickly, okay, we can't sustain this, but shoot, what do I do? I've already, these people are already, they're already getting paid per hour type of thing. So he was able to pivot and kind of do a split arrangement where those low margin jobs that were already bid with piece pay that absolutely cannot go over that, he would subcontract out those, finish those out. So low margin jobs would not have hourly people, but where the really lucrative, lots of padding, that's where he would place the hourly folks. And so he was able to make it work for the different kinds of jobs and the different margin levels. But that is, you really have to plan before doing that, because as we've been talking this whole podcast about, it's not just your gross hourly or annual comp. There are all of these hidden costs, and ones that we haven't even touched on. There's training before they start, before somebody starts producing revenues, there's going to be an opportunity cost of the training time, and maybe training classes and things like that. So
I think I agree with everything that you said. Planning is so important on the leadership side, because if things fail, it's not the employee's fault. It is the leader's fault for the poor planning. But because I mentioned this on the last episode, females coming with empathy, I want to touch on that side a little bit, because not only are there hidden costs to payroll, but there is a human side, right? We have now people that are relying on us to pay their mortgage, to pay their car insurance, and to get even more personal, to put food on the table for possibly spouses and children. And I have an employee that's caring for their elderly parent. And so it's not just, poor planning isn't just going to affect your financials. You are talking about real people's lives. And if you don't look at that as a responsibility, then I would really question if you're ready to sit in a leadership role. And I say that also to myself, because there are moments, again, I talked about this on some of the first podcast episode, is that, I sat in a leadership chair well before I was fully matured to sit in that chair. And so I was very much thrown into a shark tank as this little minnow by my own choice. I chose to sit in that seat, but I learned those hard lessons of, if I bring people on too fast, I had to lay off people because we couldn't sustain it. And those people, they had families that they had to go home to that night and explain it. And so I think this segues really beautifully into the red flags that we see around payroll. And there's so many of them, but the major ones that I see are poor planning on the leader's part on like, do we really need this person to come in? And if they come in, being very clear on what their role and expectation are going to be. And you can do that in many ways: clear job descriptions, measurable KPIs, and understanding the training that goes into it. But if you are currently covering payroll through lines of credits, through short-term loans, through credit cards, through owner infusions into the business, you probably really need to reevaluate the company and the ability to bring on employees, because paying payroll through those levers is also not sustainable. And you're going to find yourself in some of those messy conversations that I found myself in. But another really, really big one that I see is that owners and leaders don't know the percentage of payroll to revenue. And that's different in every industry. You know, it's different in the construction world, and it's different between subcontractors and general contractors, and different whether you're in the restaurant business or IT business. But you should know what that is. And that is a very clear indicator that when revenue increases and payroll stays stagnant, you probably need to start triggering some of those conversations of checking in with your employees. Do they need more help? Can the business sustain it if we bring this on? Lack of runway calculation. How many business owners do not know their runway is mind blowing to me. Like, and what I mean by runway, for those of you that may be newer to business or new to your own businesses or leadership, runway is if no more revenue came in starting right now, how long could the business sustain on the cash that it has? And that tells you if the business is healthy to bring on more. And so I would love to see, to hear some of your perspectives around that, or some red flags that you see around payroll, or if you fully just agree with what I have mentioned.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind as you're speaking. First one is, again, that kind of the prep of, am I ready to hire or not? One thing that I want to offer is, again, this is something that I came to the conclusion of, okay, this is something I'm going to need at least, these first couple of years until there is an opportunity for growth for my employees. So, business leaders, don't forget about contractors and outsourced services because they're a golden nugget that's available that a lot of people don't know about. So first thing, contractors. So if you're not ready to fork out, the benefits and the whole thing that comes with the premium to that gross comp amount, then do consider contractors. Contractors are, they're 1099, they're not W-2'd, so they're not your employees. It's a completely legally different, different legal description. You can't treat your contractors like employees, otherwise you're really defining them as employees. But essentially, if it's either not a full 40-hour week, but you need services to some degree, contracting is a good idea, or even 40 hours, but you're not paying them benefits and payroll taxes. So if that works for them, and you'd be surprised, a lot of independent contractors, they're like, oh no, I want, I have an S corp or whatever, like I don't want the payroll taxes, like I have my own business here. So definitely consider that. And then fractional services. So if you, whether it's a bookkeeper or a CFO, Kash, you and I see this very often in the CFO sphere, where, some sort of direction of, looking beyond the operations, looking ahead, like, where am I heading with my business? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Am I on the way there? Like, you cannot expect your controller or bookkeeper to give you those answers. Well, yes, they will have an opinion if they're involved, but you absolutely cannot put that burden of calculating and planning for them, because controllers, they're all about the operations, financial operations. Whatever happens on the ground in operations, they're whatever uh, dollar sign is attached to that transaction, that's operations. So, you know, and also dealing with people, your employees, other departments. So that's your controller. You don't want to bog them down with the bigger picture things. But you don't, a lot of smaller businesses, they can't afford a CFO. CFO carries a pretty hefty price tag, but you can, not rent one out, but you could pretty much, right? Yeah. So fractional services are great for that, to where you can dictate, exactly what you need out of them, the time commitment, and so I do want to offer kind of that. That there is an alternative before you are ready to bring somebody in-house. Definitely consider those other options for cost, and also for what you'll be getting out of it. But then the other point that I just kind of wanted to maybe end with is, you're touching on those relationships, and transparency with employees, and just the relationship aspect that I want to touch on. Because this is unfortunately something that I see too often in a lot of businesses, is employers often fail to realize that their employees are their greatest assets. And obviously not everybody is, fits the bill, and you have to do your due diligence to cut the dead weight loss, absolutely. But when you agree to hire somebody because you see something in them, you have to remember that this is a reciprocal relationship, and so you do have to think about them and the implications, and that they go home to their families afterwards. They're not your robots. And unfortunately, especially when things are stressful for company leaders, and also if they're not really understanding, like, oh my god, like, our revenues are down, okay, we have to cut people, okay, great, we're going on this cutting spree. But then they don't realize that they've cut, now they can't operate, now they're putting burden on other people who don't know how to do those other things, and so they're creating a bigger strain. And I just, too many times, I see kind of this very discounted kind of approach, I guess, more like a uh, seeing employees as very replaceable. They're serving me this one thing today. Tomorrow, I don't need that one thing, so goodbye. And I just want to encourage our listeners to really think about this. This is no different than any other relationship in your life. This, you want to treat your banker with respect, your grocer with respect, your absolutely everybody whom you encounter in your life. You want to give them respect and recognize what they are bringing to the table, and realizing that it's a reciprocal relationship. They don't want to stay in one place. They want to grow. Like, you want to continue showing, if they're showing up for you, you want to show up for your employees.
100%. Like, I couldn't have said it better myself. I actually had a conversation with a proposed client today, and she's building a business. It's actually a very fascinating business that I can't really disclose here, but she's in talks with Costco and some big retailers, and the revenue hasn't quite met some of these growth conversations, which is totally okay. But she's very much a forward thinker, and so she's looking at the strategic side of, I know I'm going to need a CFO because this goes beyond a bookkeeper. And she made a comment today about, I know bookkeeping isn't what you want to do, and it's kind of, for lack of a better term, like below you. And I caught her for just a second, because I said, while bookkeeping is not my bread and butter, it's not where I want to spend my time, it's not where I find value in my time, they are so important. right? Like I can't do what I do as a CFO and advise you strategically if the bookkeeper is not doing the reconciling and
Yeah.
cleaning up accurately. And what I mean by that is, if they're reconciling and then leaving uncleared charges without communicating that, we now have expenses that are probably getting double recorded. And so when I go to have that executive call, we touch on those areas like, wow, your marketing this month has been a little high. But then when we dig into it, it's because something got charged twice, or something got cleared, something wasn't uncleared, and they didn't clear that second charge out. And so, to your point, it is so important that it doesn't matter where you sit on the totem pole. Every piece of that is so important. And as a leader, it's our responsibility to make sure that each of those sections of the totem pole feels so important. And so, not only do I try as a leader, because I've also eaten my fair share of shit sandwiches and learned the kind of leader that I don't want to be and that I do want to be, is when I take care of my bookkeepers and I treat them as assets on my team, they also ensure that when I go into that executive call, that I'm as prepared as can be and can really advise at a strategic level, which is where I want to operate. Um, but another thing that you touched on that I just want to go a little bit deeper on is the 1099 versus W-2. Because so often I see business owners and leaders think to themselves, well, I'll just avoid all of the extra hidden costs of a W-2 employee by going to a 1099. You touched on this and you said it, that they are two very different functions. You will get the same work, right? You can have a W-2 bookkeeper and a 1099 bookkeeper. They will still keep your books. They will still make sure reconciliation is happening, but how you treat them matters so much from a legal standpoint, right? Your W-2 employee, you can tell them you have to be here from 8 to 5, and we're going to operate within these parameters, and these are your expectations. Whereas with a 1099, they may work from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. and you don't get to dictate. You don't get to dictate their time. You don't get to dictate things like appearance. You don't get to dictate necessarily how they show up for the company. I mean, I hope that they would, but it's so important that you know that you can't bring on a 1099 expecting to avoid hidden costs but maintain control.
Additionally, great point, and something I want to touch on with that is with you mentioned hidden costs, right? And even though I would really, really, really discourage all founders and business owners from abusing their salaried employees and pushing on, a lot of overtime on them, knowing that, you don't have to pay them. But that is a key difference as well, is a contractor, it depends on your specific agreement, but they're either hourly, and so if they're hourly, then you will pay them more than what you're paying your salaried folks to do the same thing, because they will charge you for every minute that they are thinking about it and doing the work. um, but there are ways to get around it. It could also be a project fee, however, like we talked about, piece pay rate, the same kind of same concept. Maybe it's a fee for this project, however long it takes you, is $1,500 or whatever. So I mean, there are different ways that you can avoid some of those hidden costs, but you really have to know what you're getting into with the contracts, and really and with the exercise that I did with you, I actually did a comparison of, I did not think that 40, when you're talking full-time work, usually a fractional premium will never make economical sense, but it did in this case. And I had to lay it all out, and compare side by side, and oh shit, I'm getting a way better deal here, and I don't have to put the the time. There's also that time of training, investing the training time, and getting them up to speed, where I know if I start working with one of your bookkeepers, here's how you get into bill.com, here's your inbox, please start. There's a certain amount of already uh, talent that I know is already there and I don't have to do much training for.
But I think you too, with that, if we have any contract people listening, and what I mean by that is people very similar to myself, where maybe you own your own business and you're getting contracted out or you're operating as a 1099. One thing, and this is again a shit sandwich that I ate. So I'm not just, we're both not just feeding you these hypothetical situations. Most of these situations that we have brought up, we have either sat at those tables, those picnic tables,
Yep.
and experienced them ourselves, or we have been very near to those picnic tables. And so one of the things you need to keep in mind in that 1099 aspect and on the ownership side is a scope of work is so important. I consider the scope of work to be very similar to the job description, and where that helps is that if I, again, if we use this situation of you and I, if you and I agree to the terms that have been set out and you come to me and you say, well, Kash, we didn't have so and so file the I'm going into like a controller thing, something that a controller file, like uh, local tax, right? I would come back and say to you, well, I totally understand your frustrations. However, tax filing is typically on the controller, and that is not in our contract. So not only does it protect me as the contractor or 1099, it then also protects you in the fact that you are getting services that you clearly outlined, we both
Mm-hmm.
agreed to, but a scope of work before you enter into this. And it can be in the finance world, where I play, or it can be to your point in any realm. Like you now see fractional marketing firms, you see fractional procurement firms. There's this level of fractionality wherever you go in most industries. But when you go into those, if you are the one being contracted, be very clear and specific. And if we dig into this, my contract to you was 5 pages long, right? It was very clear, it was very concise. I put it together from a lens of, do you feel like everything that you are looking for is covered in here? And do I also feel like my expectations are very clearly laid out?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would highly suggest a scope of work on wherever you're going in the 1099 realm.
Absolutely. Yeah, protects both sides for sure.
I think we gave a lot to the listeners to chew on when it comes to payroll. I feel like this is a topic that will come up again and again and sprinkled in many other conversations because it's so relevant, and we can go into so many different industries and topics on it. But is there anything else that you want to touch on before we land this plane?
I think it's probably time to land the plane.
Okay.
And with that, here's the reframe that I want to offer. Payroll pressure doesn't mean you made a bad decision. It means your business has moved into a new level of responsibility. The mistake isn't feeling the weight, it's pretending you shouldn't. When payroll is heavy, it's usually asking for clarity. Clear revenue expectations, clear roles and accountability, and clear boundaries around what the business can and can't support. Ignoring that clarity doesn't protect people, but facing it thoroughly does.
And from the human side, I want to say this clearly. Feeling the emotional weight of payroll doesn't make you weak. It means you care. Caring doesn't require self reassurance. You're allowed to build a business that supports people and supports you. Sustainability isn't selfish, it's what allows leadership to last.
So if payroll has been weighing on you, here's what I want you to hear. The weight isn't a sign you're failing, it's a signal that your role has changed. Payroll isn't a cost to manage, it's a responsibility to lead with clarity, not fear. Going past the balance sheet means recognizing when numbers are asking for better structure, not more sacrifice.
And it means giving yourself permission to talk about the pressure, even if only with yourself at first. You don't have to carry it silently. You don't have to prove your strength by suffering. Leadership is heavy sometimes. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. So take a breath, Notice what came up, and when you're ready, come back and keep going past the balance sheet with us.
If today's conversation resonated with you, we'd love to hear your support. Follow or subscribe to Pass the Balance Sheet wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. If you found value in this discussion, take a second to leave a review. It helps more business owners to find honest conversations about money and leadership. Most importantly, share the episode with someone who might need it. Forward it to a fellow business owner, partner, or leader who's carrying the weight behind the numbers. The more we normalize real conversations about business, the stronger our community becomes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Pass the balance sheet.